All right, guys, welcome to the One Life podcast. And this is the first episode of the new season of podcast. And really excited to chat with our guest today, who is a perfect guest to share not only what One Life is trying to accomplish, because she herself has been doing this over the last 2 decades, but also to talk about the future and talk about how One Life is really impacting the youth with our One Life Dare to Dream program. So those of you guys who are catching this, welcome to the One Life podcast. Our guest today is Jennifer Ozgur, and Jennifer is a author. She's a speaker. She's a writer. She's also a teacher, and most importantly, an expert on child or student success. And really, she's been spending the last 2 decades in classrooms on the front lines trying to help students succeed in this kind of system. And she's someone who has played a large role in our One Life Dare to Dream program, and someone who has just a lot of insight on how we as a One Life community can really make a big impact for generations to come. So we finally made it, Jennifer. We're here and it is live. I can tell on my phone. So thank you for taking the time out of your day today, and welcome to the One Life podcast.
Thank you. I'm extremely honored to be here. And I just have to say congratulations to you on your addition to your family. And I would really like to know how you're doing.
It has been such a journey, and I thank you for asking. It's been a journey, and it hasn't fully sunk in, is what it is. We're finally getting into a little bit of a routine, and it was this moment that we had been anticipating for quite some time, and it wasn't actually even our first pregnancy, unfortunately. And so this was something that had a lot of tension and anxiety. And so the fact that our baby is here and the delivery and labor was smooth, and it was the smoothest part of it. And it's so weird to kind of be like, wait a minute, like we're good, like everything's cool. And so it was kind of this big sigh of relief. And really, I think it allows just us to get back to focusing on the future, I guess, because it made me realize when you or your loved one's health isn't secure, then what matters beyond that starts to take a lot, tends to be a lot less significant. And so I think that now we can start thinking about what the future looks like, as opposed to just trying to get there. So I don't know, maybe that answer was too real for you.
When I became a parent, it was just so surreal. You can't, for me, to look at this child, and first off, as a woman, to say, I can't believe I grew this, like, this is amazing. And to realize that this being is totally dependent upon you. And sometimes it doesn't quite, it would kind of like wash past me. And other times it would just hit me like a ton of bricks in this fantastic, awesome way. And the love that I would feel, and the power and magnificence that I can be a part of this little piece of the universe. And it's all in their eyes when you look at them. And I'm kind of rambling on because it's just so hard to capture, but I'm just excited for you to be in that space.
It's those moments, right, when I think for me, as enjoying teaching so much, seeing and being able to teach someone something so basic as just how to eat, seeing someone figure out how to eat for the first time, or seeing someone, roll over for the first, like those first, I think, are kind of put in perspective. And going towards kind of what our topic was today was, in terms of education and trying to create an educational system that really, like you said, sets up kids for success and sets up kids to thrive is that for some reason, I don't know why there was a disconnect between parenting and kids' success. It was like, well, it was the teacher's responsibility, and the teachers could only do so much, and the parents were pointing the fingers at the teachers, and a lot of the teachers were sitting there with their hands up, not know, looking at the parents. So I think kind of what you're saying is that we have a responsibility that is deeper than I think a lot of people realize. And I know that responsibility hit me, obviously, when the baby got here, but it's hit me a lot of times in business when I had my first employee, or, when you have these firsts that put it in perspective. So let's get into kind of the topic today. Rakshana, thanks for hopping on. Carolyn and Shailene, I appreciate you guys catching this live. This will be put in a couple of different places. You can find it here on our Facebook. Also, if you are not subscribed to the One Life YouTube channel, it'll be there. And also, it will be on the One Life community and Mighty Network, which we'll talk about a little bit, and everywhere podcasts can be found. Jennifer, let's dive in, though, and let's talk about why you're so passionate about what you do. You spent and devoted much of the last 2 decades to this mission, which is not a vanity kind of career. It's definitely not, you definitely were probably not doing it for the money. But why did you feel so passionate about going into education and spending time with children, educating them in what I can only imagine you felt like the black sheep of the crowd? I just, knowing your personality and knowing kind of your beliefs, I can just only see you trying to fix all of the big holes in the system. So share with us a little bit about your experience, and share kind of why you've been set on this path and mission to educate parents and educate really people on how they can set up their kids for success.
Sure. I guess the first thing of why I decided to go into education is from my story growing up, when I was, to some degree, it was elementary school, but then once middle school hit, and I wasn't even around when it was middle school, I was there with junior high school, which is basically a smaller scaled down version of high school. Middle school came later, where they recognize that transition time between childhood and adolescence, young adulthood. So for me, it was junior high, and I really didn't fit in. You mentioned black sheep. Even then, I felt like I didn't quite belong. I kind of viewed the world in a different way that other people didn't quite get. As a result, I didn't really have a huge social circle of friends. And that, I think a lot of students would feel that way, but a lot of times when students go home, that's their soft place to fall. And so if they hit a little blips during the school day, they come home and their parents build them back up, and then they go back to school the next day and continue the cycle. But for me, I would go home, and that was not a soft place to fall. It was pretty much a critical atmosphere, was not very supportive, didn't really validate some of my unique qualities that I wanted to think were assets. But I felt judged pretty much 24/7, and that takes its toll on a kid. And there were 2 or 3 teachers in my life that were it not for them, I really don't know how I would have turned out. I managed to get through high school. I went on to college, and when I decided what major to go into, I wanted to be that one teacher for other students like me. And that pretty much has been my path for the past 20 years. There's always a handful of kids that I teach that I can tell are a little bit of lost sheep, or they don't go with the flow as far as mainstream culture. They're artistic or maybe a little reclusive, a little socially awkward for whatever reason. And those are the students that really tend to bond with me and form this meaningful connection way beyond the curriculum. I can write poetry, I can analyze a Shakespeare sonnet, no problem. But I think the one thing that really is what motivates me all the time is to make those connections with those students who I see myself in them.
You hear that in a lot of kind of success stories, is that there's one or two or three mentors that really stand out and are willing to almost relate to the kid in a way that maybe parents aren't willing to, or maybe that. One thing that I wrote down as you were talking was life skills, and it was my biggest kind of issue with my schooling was they didn't really prepare me how to deal with anxiety. They didn't really prepare me how to deal and talk to people of the opposite sex, people of the same sex. They didn't talk about, and then we could talk about taxes and personal finances and savings and all the, but it seemed like the really practical skills were kind of left out. And when kids finish college, whether they're 18 years old or even when my classmates, 23, 24 years old, were still not prepared to go out and live real life. So is that still the experience of kind of students today, or is there hope in what either the education system is doing, or is there hope in what parents can do? How do you see us bridging that gap so that whenever that moment is that they are ready to become an adult, that it's not a shock to them?
Well, I think no matter what field you go into, I think the one thing that is consistent is yourself, right? So you need to have a sense of empowerment, resiliency, confidence, and all those soft skills that people really need in life that will get you through some of the tough times. And my big platform is taking a proactive stance on all of these issues. Anxiety, depression, emotional dysregulation. And what I find frustrating many times is, since I did come from a surroundings where I was battling some of that because of my upbringing, I'm hyper tuned to that. I'm very sensitive to any student who may be struggling emotionally. So my red flags go up, and I will take it to a guidance counselor and go through the process and through the system. But until there's so many different boxes that are checked, and they have to collect so much data, and as rightly they should, because just, when one teacher has their spidey sense go off like mine, they can't just go and run with it. They have to be very cautious about how they handle that. But a lot of times what happens is it may take 3 months, 6 months, a year to finally get enough people who see what I see. And at that point, we've lost a whole year of this person's life and their struggles, and they're getting worse. And if they're walking into the classroom with a heavy backpack of emotion, their learning is impacted and affected. So it becomes a struggle, and the whole thing starts to unravel, if you will. So that's my big thing, is how to teach these skills from way, way, way younger age, and not wait until they're ready to have a crisis. And to also teach that proactively through reaching the parents and teaching the parents emotional regulation through parenting techniques. So that's my big thing, is to do that. And what that has to do with me being certified as a secondary English education teacher, not much, right? So I walk that fine line of a mental health standpoint to getting them prepared for the state tests and making sure that they can write their thesis statement and not plagiarize and all of that. So that's kind of my life's work. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, it looked like
okay.
There's always the age-old question of do you prepare someone for life or do you prepare someone for the tests? And it seems like more and more people are waking up to how preparing someone for life actually improves the test scores. But let's say a new parent like me comes to you, or those of you guys who are hopping on or listening to this on the podcast. What are some of the proactive ways that parents and educators can help young people be more resilient, be more confident when maybe they don't have the most perspective?
I think one thing is to always realize that children are listening to you and watching you. They may not necessarily be listening to you in the way where you tell them to do something and they automatically comply, but they are listening and they're always gathering data in their minds on what is this world like? How do people treat people? And their first impression is how it is at home. So if you have a lot of tension in the house, if there's a lot of yelling, a lot of judgment, they think that that is like that across every circumstance and setting that they will encounter. So if they feel a lot of tension and anxiety at home, they'll display that in the classroom. They'll display that with their friends. So to realize that their views of the world will be coming from you.
Jennifer, I'm going to ask us to go maybe in a different direction, but I
Sure.
think that one thing that One Life's goal is just to give hope to both these kids at the One Life Dare to Dream program and then for people in our community. So have you seen it work? Like, can you think of a story or can you think of an experience? And obviously we don't need names or anything, but are you able to share an experience of either a kid or a parent that got it, that kind of turned it around and was able to, I don't know. I just think that there's so much negative stories and so much negativity and revolving around. Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, school shootings, suicide, bullying. I mean, do you have an uplifting story out there of someone or someone that got it?
Oh, sure. I mean, I have so many of them, and there's always this through line of building a sense of community by talking to the parents, the school working together, and really feeling that there's a place for everyone at the table where we can all discuss some of the struggles, different strategies, trying things out, and making it solution-based and having the child in the center and really looking towards the future. So, I've taught summer school because I really enjoy having that personal connection with a couple of weeks with struggling students who weren't able to display mastery over the course of the year. And when I'm able to see the child in a very small classroom for 4 weeks, and every day I see the parent dropping them off, picking them up, and I'm able to connect with them. Hey, how's it going? Did you have a good weekend? Hey, he forgot his book. Can he make sure he has it tomorrow? Oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. And you're making that personal connection every day. Then that's when they flourish, because the child sees the teacher and the parent working together, communicating, trying to be results oriented. And that's when that same child I will see a couple of months later in town, and they'll say, hey, Mrs. Ozgur, you won't believe it. I just won a poetry contest. I said, what? Yeah. The stuff that we learned this summer. I did that, and my teacher nominated my stuff in it, and it won a prize. So sometimes kids just need that extra support, and how they say that they won't care until they see how much you care, right? Paraphrasing it. But that's one thing that I see time and time again, is when the student realizes that all the adults are working together because they really care and want the child to succeed.
Guys, if you guys are catching this live, feel free to throw any of your questions in there. And then Jennifer is actually in our One Life Mighty Network community. It's a new, different kind of Facebook group meets, I don't know what it meets. Facebook group meets a bunch of like another cool app, and a way for you to really learn and connect with some of these masters at a deeper level. So we're going to put this interview into the One Life Mighty Network, and you can get access to it there, and also hang out with Jennifer as well. But Jennifer, as we're kind of going towards the end of this, I always like to leave people with some practical things. And we've talked about, I love the idea of creating personal connections. And if there is someone who's a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a teacher, whatever it is, in some sort of capacity, what are things that they should be doing on an everyday basis or on a consistent basis to make sure that they are creating that environment for kids, like you said, to be collaborative, to communicate? Because I think that's a novel thing for parents these days. At least if I talk to my parents about it, they'd look at me with a curious face and tell me to, go back to my room or something like that. So what are some things, and what are some more proactive steps that parents and educators can take to help?
So right now I'm in the process of writing the book called The 4 Verbs of Love. It's the book that I'm writing based upon my parenting system that I've gone into Philadelphia schools and working with the teachers and the parents. So the 4 Verbs of Love, it's an acronym that if you listen, you observe, you validate, and you empathize. And if you do those 4 things on a daily basis, then a lot of things tend to fall in place, because there's so much information out there in the internet, and so many wonderful books, and there's so many parenting experts, that there's something for whatever problem you may have, and you can go to those experts, and that's fantastic. But sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. You don't know where to start. And this is easy to remember, that love, every parent loves their kid, but what does that really look like on a daily basis? How do you actually love your kid? And to listen to them, and active listening, to let them know that you are really listening to them and truly engaged with them. And then to observe them, which means, where are they with certain areas in their life? What should I be looking for? And to observe their friends, what their room looks like, their body language, not just what's coming out of their mouth. The validation is huge, and a key to validate what is important to the child. And that doesn't necessarily mean that validating means you say yes to them all the time, but to validate that they have an opinion and that their opinion matters. And then finally, empathy, to know developmentally each stage and what's appropriate. Because if you understand what it's like for a 3-year-old and why they're having that temper tantrum, or why is that 12-year-old getting so upset over something that you think is very trivial, if you understand where they're coming from socially, what they're capable of cognitively, then I think a lot of things, we can bring some calm, some productive discussion to the table with the children along those different ages and stages.
Can we go through those one more time? So we had listen, observe, and then what was the V?
Validate.
Validate and empathize. Okay.
Yes.
Let's dive into a couple. Let's take a moment because you did a great job of going over in each of those. I'd like to have you share maybe some thoughts on each one and how people can. You mentioned active listening, right? And I've heard as a parent, being present is the most important. You know, just being present. And what is the difference, or what is the mistake that a lot of parents are doing that maybe they don't realize is not listening? Like I see that being a very, like, people say I'm here, or I'm listening, but you mentioned active listening. So what's the nuance there, and have you seen parents making that mistake?
Well, where I see some things like that happening that you might be referring to are in parent-teacher conferences with the kid. And I'm sure this probably then happens at home, where you may ask the child a question and then not give them enough wait time. And then that silence is very unnerving. So you'd say, how was school today? Did you have any test? What about this? How about that? And it starts having all these questions. Whereas if you just say, I'm really wondering how school went today. Can you tell me one exciting thing?
Mm.
And then you wait 3-5 seconds, right? And that's hard to do. For a while, then they'll realize that you are waiting to hear them talk, because they figured it out that if they don't talk, you'll start filling in the space. So I think that would be one thing, is to be okay with the quiet. And then when they finally start saying something, you can just say, oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more.
I love it. I think waiting, that's a big most people don't realize that a lot of people need time to think. Let's talk about observe. When you talk about observing, and kind of, you mentioned kind of meeting them where they're at. What is I'm always curious about, like, what are they doing now that's not working, that I think most just aren't aware of, right? I think a lot of people that the funny joke that I made when we left the hospital is they gave me my baby and they're like, okay, there you go. Here's a pamphlet or two. If he turns this color, bring him back. But other than that, there's no handbook or guidebook on how to be a good parent. So what's maybe the typical thing that people are doing when they think they're observing, and how do they observe at a better, at a better level, if you will?
I mean, it really varies from age to age, what to be looking for with a 2 or 3-year-old versus a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's talk about that. What are some of those differences, and how do they differ?
Well, like, I'm thinking of my children at the playground, and the way they're playing, and the way they interact with other children, and to observe how they react to children. What is their trigger? They a lot of times might give you some signals before they're tired, before they're ready to have a meltdown. If you observe them, they'll give you clues long before. Or if you look to come to their rescue right away, if you observe and wait long enough, they may be able to work out the problem on their own. So, really a lot of it, the social interaction with the younger children, I think is very telling. As far as the older children, I see a lot of it through just executive functioning behaviors. And how do I want to say it? It's not that I'm advocating for helicopter parenting, but to observe when the child gets home, what do they do? When was the last time you looked in their backpack and went through their folders and their binders? Do you know for a fact that everything is neat and being filed away in their organization system or not? When was the last time you went into their room, or when you're putting away their laundry and their drawers and things like that, where I see a lot of students with some of those red flags, and it's because maybe the parent wasn't really knowing what to look for subtle warning signs that things might not quite be functioning the way they should be on all their cylinders.
Yeah, it's that's a great tip, and my business mind is like, oh, they just have different KPIs. There's just, babies have different performance indicators, and teenagers have these other ones. And what you're talking about is just being intentional with being involved in their life. And so, if there's anybody who's catching this live, now's your chance to throw any questions down there for Jennifer. And Jennifer, I know you are okay. Well, we've got two more, and this is coming out in a book. You said you're writing a book on the 4 verbs.
Yes.
So I want to talk about that. Let's go through really quickly, validate, because I find a lot of, I don't like to generalize, but a lot of, here I go generalizing, a lot of boomers and Generation X, just parents don't see the value in a different point of view always. And they don't, I think the newer generations are being exposed to less of a black and white world and more of a rainbow colored world. Whereas honoring, you're talking about validating, honoring someone's thoughts or mistakes or ideas or whatever it is. At least it just wasn't part of my upbringing, and I saw it, I didn't see a whole lot of that. So what does that mean for a parent? And can you think of like an example of someone or like a way that someone can do it the right way, or just share a little bit on the validation part?
Sure. I think I'll give this one to you with toddlers, because you'll be there before you know it. A lot of times when you are validating, all you're saying to the child is, I understand where you're coming from. So perfect example is when a child is at the vending machine or at the store and they want a toy, or they want to put the coins in the vending machine and get their snack. And mommy, I want it. No, you don't. Let's go. And you're pulling them by the arm, trying to get them out to the parking lot. They're saying, I want it. You're saying no. And they're freaking out because they're saying, yes, I really do want it. I want it. And it's not that they really need to get it. They just want to be heard. Just like when we're adults and you come home and you say, I had such a tough day. My boss was doing this, or if you're an entrepreneur, my client is doing that, and it's just so tough. And then someone goes into solving mode, or, well, if you would just do this, and then you feel completely invalidated. Isn't that frustrating as an adult? And we're doing this to a 2-year-old who has no capacity to self-advocate and say, excuse me, mom, I wasn't really questioning whether or not I would get that. I'm just telling you that I wanted it, right? So to validate, you would say something like, well, if you listen to them and you observe why they want it. So is it that they're actually hungry? Is it that they saw 2 other kids go to the vending machine and get it, and they just want to do what the other 2 kids did it? Or do they want to watch the thing drop down from the vending machine because that's a fun thing to do, to pick the thing and watch it? It's like one of those claw things that you always get something, right? So you try to figure out why, and then you say to them, well, if you could get something from the vending machine, which one would you want? Oh, you'd like the pretzels? Yeah, why do you like them? Oh, oh yeah, they're crunchy. Oh, they're so, oh, mommy really likes those too. Or dad, oh, I think I would like this kind instead. And you take like a 30-second conversation to find out why. And you say, I can see why you'd want that. That's really cool. And then say, but we're in a hurry. We really need to get going. Can you wait 5 minutes and we'll go here? Or, I always tell my children about how much things cost. And I'd say it's $1 in the vending machine, but we can get an entire bag at the grocery store. Do you think you could wait? And then we'll have even more for later. And usually I'm able to calm them down, and they never even escalate. That's the whole thing, is they want it. And I say, oh, really? You want it? Why? Yeah, I agree with you. That is pretty cool. But here's the deal. And they don't have a meltdown because they really believed that I heard them and they were validated.
I learned that in sales. It was like, it's like, wow, you're just handling objections with the child. I'm like, that she's a great salesperson. Like that's like to a T how you would close a deal right there. I love it. And the last one is empathize. So what does kind of that mean, and how does that look for a parent?
So empathizing means that you have the ability to put yourself in their situation and let them know that you understand their position. So it's very similar to validating, but it's hard to validate if you can't empathize where they're at. So with a younger child, it's knowing that they do not have the vocabulary to articulate their needs. So it's where you don't want to put words in the mouth of an older child because they would hate that you're telling them what to think. For a younger child, you can play that kind of 20 question game and be their voice until you understand where they're coming from. Oh, is it that you're hungry? Oh, do you like the sound of the vending machine? Do you like the coins? What? And then eventually they'll say yes or no, and you figure it out. For someone who's older, we may not understand why something is such a big deal for a kid, and we say, oh, they're just being overly dramatic. But for them, if you can remember when you were 12 or 13 and a certain song came on the radio and you had to hear that song, and if your parent, and you turn off the radio right in the middle of their favorite song and they pitch a fit, well, that's their currency, is their social status. Maybe they're trying to learn the lyrics to that song. Maybe that song brings them a lot of great joy because they had a really bad day, and you turning that off is really stealing their joy. And what's the big deal? Let the song play through. Right. So those types of things, as far as empathizing, where are they at that particular point in their life, and why are things so important to them? And you can honor them in that way. Doesn't mean they always get what they want, but you can honor them.
This is so valuable. And I know we talked about the timing of it being great, given that I became a parent last week. And you talked about answering the question, how do you love your kids? And you said, listen, observe, validate, and empathize. And I love frameworks because I'm always the person who is saying how, don't just yell at me to do it. Tell me how, and I can make it happen. Jennifer, this has been super valuable. Where should they learn more? Where's the best place? I know you are a contributor and you're a writer locally, but if someone wants to get connected with you online, where's the best place to find you?
Right now, the best place would be on my Facebook page, and that is Genformation, JENFORMATION. And that's where I am giving lots of information that will lead to transformation in your family's lives. I throw a lot of information about neuroscience and trauma-informed instruction, brain-based theories that I don't get too sciencey with it, but just different ways to learn about our mind, the way we process information, the way we connect with one another. And I have a list of all my workshops and professional development that I can offer as well.
This is beautiful. This has been great. Guys, Jennifer has been such a treat, and I hope you take this with as much love as I'm giving it, in the sense that when we connected out in Philly, I said she's just as nerdy and passionate about what she does as I am, and it's great, because I think that's what's beautiful about the One Life community. Is such a diverse community, but everybody really cares about making a difference with what they're doing, and you are definitely an embodiment of that. So guys, this interview will be put in a couple different places. So if you're catching it on the Facebook page, you're amazing. We love you. But also make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And if you go to One Life Fully Lived /network, we're going to link up the link to our new Mighty Networks. It's like a really cool interactive place where you get to hang out, and we're putting all of the content, all of the talks from conferences of past, and all of these interviews will be up there so that you have that place to go. There's one central place where you can go and learn lots of stuff from the One Life community. So Jennifer, thank you so much again. And any last things to send to the parents before we sign off?
If you have any questions, you can send me a message on Genformation, and I'm always on there, and I'm looking forward to dialogue with anybody with any concerns that they might have. And congratulations again to you and your family. So excited, so very happy for you.
Thank you. Guys, we have Will Little coming up in 15 minutes, so we'll see you on that one too.